Democrats have spoken out against releasing the document. They say Trump is trying to undermine the investigation into Russia's suspected interference in the 2016 election. Many Republicans are backing Trump's push for the memo's release.
The memo is not an indictment of the FBI, of the Department of Justice. It does not impugn the Mueller investigation or the Deputy Attorney General. What it is the Congress's legitimate function of oversight to make sure that the FISA process is being used correctly, and that if it wasn't being used correctly, that needs to come to light and people need to be held accountable so that we do not have problems again, because this does affect our civil liberties.
Let's talk to Kevin McAleese in Washington, D.C. for us. Kevin, what's at stake here if President Trump does, as is widely expected, decide to release this memo before the end of the week?
Yeah, it's no longer a matter of if, but when President Trump will release this memo. Reports from the Washington Post this evening saying that he'd been keen to see the contents out there in the public sphere for some time, long before he'd even seen the contents for himself, which we believe happened on Wednesday of this week. But yes, he sees this as clear evidence of there being anti-Trump bias at play within both the FBI and the Department of Justice. This is a theme that has been part of Trump's theory dating back to his campaign, when he said the handling of the Hillary Clinton email case was evidence that there was a rigged system, and the FBI were part of that. Perhaps he sees the release of this 4-page memo as sort of legitimizing the concerns that he says or claims to have had for some time. But what's at stake here? There's a great deal, because he is ignoring the advice of his intelligence agencies, in particular the FBI, who said they have grave concerns, have warned against the release of this memo, say it is not accurate, it paints a false picture of the facts from these confidential details. He is willing to ignore the advice of a director, Christopher Wray, that he put in the job 6 months ago, it should be pointed out. What then does Christopher Wray do? Well, there's a growing sense that he may be forced to resign if Trump goes ahead with that release. And then, of course, there's the bigger picture, that special counsel. What will this mean for the future of Robert Mueller, a man that we know Donald Trump reportedly tried to have fired until he was convinced otherwise by senior members of his staff to do so. So what will this mean? Donald Trump, could he use this as grounds to kill Robert Mueller's involvement in the Russia probe?
I mean, this is now a political fight on so many different levels, isn't it? Are Republican lawmakers really united in their support of this document being made public?
Certainly, the House Intelligence Committee had unanimous Republican support, led by Devin Nunes. However, across the party, the picture is a little opaque, because you've got Republicans, you heard in your introduction there, Speaker Ryan saying that, you know, this is about transparency and making sure that the Department of Justice and the FBI are not abusing their powers, in this case their powers of surveillance, to be able to surveil the US citizens. In this case it was a Trump aide by the name of Carter Page, allegedly. But there are also Republicans who are concerned that we have a president who is at odds with the FBI, who is deciding to ignore the intelligence that is before him. That sets a precedent, and much of this is very improvised, because it simply hasn't happened before. We haven't had an administration that is willing to sort of circle around the advice being given to him by these institutions, these intelligence institutions, in a bid to release a memo which is highly questionable and has been criticised by the Democrats as a hit job, as an attempt to degrade the Robert Mueller Russia probe into whether or not there was Russian interference and whether or not Donald Trump's campaign colluded to win the election with the Kremlin's help. So there's a great deal at play here, and we could find out a little bit more within the coming hours if Donald Trump gives it the go-ahead.
Kevin, keep us posted. We'll talk to you later. Kevin McAleese in Washington, D.C.